out here in the Arboretum and we're standing in the ornamental grass garden that was put in last season. And as you look at this garden, you kind of think it looks pretty sparse, and there's a reason for that. The mature size of these grasses has been taken into account, and so they're spaced accordingly so that when they reach their full size, they won't all be tied in together and you can still see the individual grasses. And if you want to decorate or landscape with ornamental grasses, you need to remember that those clumps that you buy are going to grow quite a bit. So don't just put them right next to each other trying to get an instant garden. The other thing about this garden bed here is, you know how we always stress to properly amend the soil, get some organic matter and stuff like that in there? For an ornamental grass bed, for the most part, you really don't want to add any organic matter, anything like that. If you can improve the drainage, that's good, but they really don't like a rich soil because what will happen is your grasses will kind of tend to flop out. So this is basically just kind of put in here, and this is our first season again, and there are several of these grasses that are very small, but they're already blooming, and I wanted to show you 3 of them that have a really pretty bloom on them. This first one is variegated feather reed grass, and when we think about ornamental grasses, this is a very nice showy one because of the variegation. And it basically has the green with cream variegation on it. And when the leaves first come out, there's a faint tinge of pink on this too. Now this again is a small specimen. This will actually end up being about 3 feet tall or so when it fills in, and it'll be about that large around too. The other nice thing about this grass, which is just starting to bloom here in the first part of June, are the really tall seed heads that you see here. And you can see that they've got just a little tinge of purple on them. And that is a very pretty addition to this grass, and they really pick up the wind and wave in the wind nice. Now another one of our grasses here, which really stresses that one of the great things about an ornamental grass garden is all of the different textures. This is the stipa grass, and you'll remember we had this in our foliage and texture garden last year, and we have it here and it's actually blooming. Now when the stipa grass starts to bloom, the panicles are actually green and then they turn brown really quick. This looks like kind of like flaxen curly hair here, and it's very, very soft. It's fun to touch, and it just really waves in the wind. And this grass will really bloom for us pretty much all season long. Now as we look at the base of this grass, you might note that with a grass that's this fine in texture, we really need to cut it off in the spring a little bit shorter. You can see here we've done the standard 6 inches, which is good for most ornamental grasses. But this doesn't really cover that up, and it looks like we've kind of gotten a bad haircut here, so we'd probably want to cut this down closer to the ground. And as long as we waited, till March and right before the grass starts growing, and waited till we got through the winter and cut that down low, that would be all right. But this is a really pretty addition to the garden. Now another grass that's blooming right now is the Brenda, and this is also known as quaking oats, and it is a perennial here, and a lot of times you'll see it growing by the side of streams, so it kind of likes to have a little bit of moisture, and the seed heads on it are really very interesting. Let me see if I can get one here. We've compared them to a lot of different things, a rattlesnake rattle or a squashed sow bug, but they all together are very pretty, and they almost look like little bells hanging on a stem. But these are just 3 of the grasses that are blooming right now in the season, and there are a few more in our studio gardens that I want to go take a look at. Well, always a great addition for texture and for color in an ornamental grass garden is the porcupine grass. And you may stop and look at this and say, wait, that looks more like zebra grass than porcupine grass, and it actually is in the zebra grass group. Basically, zebra grass grows up and it kind of starts to fall out, whereas porcupine grass has a very upright growth habit. You can see here it's really sticking straight up, and that's kind of why it's called porcupine grass, because it sticks straight up. So if you're looking for a grass that has this nice pattern to it, I'd go with the porcupine grass instead of the zebra grass, and it's Miscanthus sinensis strictus, it's standing straight up, as opposed to Miscanthus sinensis zebrinus. So anyway, this is a great grass, and one of the great things about it is, of course, you look on the leaves, it's got these spots of variegation that go horizontally across the leaf, and they just go up and down the leaf. Now, when it gets warm out, sometimes you'll get a little bit of scorching on those variegated spots, but it's usually not too bad. And one of the interesting things about this is that variegation is actually temperature dependent. So if this grass starts growing in the spring and it's a little bit cooler, those first pieces of grass, those first blades of grass that come up may not have that variegation in it. But once the temperatures warm up, the variegation will be there. So usually in Oklahoma, we don't ever see it without its variegation. Now, the grasses that I've shown you so far, a lot of them are fairly common. This type of grass is pretty new, and they're all perennial grasses that grow very well in our gardens. Now, this type of grass that I showed you actually is a little marginal on its winter survivability here. It's done well so far for one winter, but we'll have to watch it and see. Now, this final grass that I'm going to show you is actually a new grass, but before we get to that, I wanted to show you the purple gleam poppies, which have already started to bloom. We saw the silver garden here, and these hadn't started to bloom yet, but aren't those a beautiful poppy? And we've got our nice silver foliage here, and I really like the new colors of California poppies that are coming out. But we're not talking about poppies, we're talking about grass, and this, again, is just an absolutely gorgeous grass here. This is called ruby grass, and it's fairly new out on the market. And unfortunately, it's only hard to zone 8. So for us, it's probably going to end up being an annual grass. The bummer thing about that is it's kind of like that purple mountain grass. We love it, but it's an annual. But if it performs really well, we can use it in our beds. And we have this in the silver garden because we have this nice clump of kind of bluish silver foliage. The grass gets to be about 2 foot tall, and the really pretty part, the ruby part, is the flower on this. We've got beautiful kind of ruby red and silver flower head here, and you can see how it just kind of shines in the sun. So this will be a neat one to watch, and hopefully maybe we could get some of it to overwinter if it's in a sheltered spot. But the ornamental grasses are not only wonderful in a whole ornamental grass bed, but they're also nice in a mixed bed like we have here in the silver garden.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.